I'm Hannah Bernstein, here once again with the Embodied Psyche. I'm thrilled today to share a conversation that I had with Rahi Chun, certified sexological bodyworker, who you may recognize from a prior video in dialogue with Dr. Aileen LaPierre. I really enjoy talking to Rahi, and I've noticed profound shifts in my personal life just from being exposed to these ideas that Rahi is sharing. The conversation you're about to see took place about 3 weeks ago, and in the time since, just allowing some of his lessons about personal touch, about allowing your joy ceiling to expand, about deconstellating shame in the body. All of these things have had a really big impact on my life and brought more joy in. So I'm thrilled to be able to share that with you as well. What you're about to see includes several parts. We begin really honestly in a casual dialogue that I felt like including because I think some of you will relate to it, about just the difficulty and loneliness of being a touch-oriented person when the world has less touch spaces available. So Rahi talks about things like 5 Rhythms dance class. I talk about missing cuddle parties. And then we talk pretty explicitly about consent. We talk about the ways in which shadow desire can emerge in spaces like cuddle parties. And I wasn't planning to talk to Rahi about this, but because of his quality of presence and really diving in, it seemed appropriate to share with him what I shared with this audience in my last video about the consent violation I experienced in my own somatic therapy. And that was really valuable for me. And I hope sharing it will bring value to you too. And finally, we talk about the importance of having your own cup full, feeling like your touch needs are met, feeling like you don't need things from others. So with that, in a time when, again, there's not a lot of touch available in the world for those of us who are respecting social distancing, what you can do for yourself with things like self-touch. And Rahi actually talks about a technique for anal self-massage that he recommends for helping to get in touch with your own body. And we also talk along with that about the importance of entering into a metaphorical dialogue with your body parts, really being aware of what your body's ready for. So this may be the level you're at, this may be a little edgy, but you can really work with your body and see what it needs. Once again, we start by talking about touch in the time of Corona. I hope you'll enjoy.
How's your week been?
You know, to be honest with you, time is still a little amorphous for me, you know? It's just been a very surreal summer. And yeah, there's a lot that I'm needing to get done. But it feels a little bit like trying to run in molasses sometimes, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I think there's something about certainly as a society and just simply as a functional city, we're not back up to speed. And I think given everyone's, whether you believe in collective energy or not, I just think there's kind of stagnation in all sorts of areas, and I'm certainly, I love when I'm feeling in flow and kind of in my groove. And so much of that has to do with how I'm feeling in my body, I do my regular, 5 Rhythms dance on a weekly basis, my hot yoga. And absent these things, it does make a difference to your energy flow, how we're feeling in our bodies, I think translates into, our sense of flow in our day-to-day, existence. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely miss some of those things that felt like my kind of communal care practices.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it really speaks to, how important to our nervous systems and how aliveness we feel when we're socially engaged, and we have those communal connections, those, it's so simple. And, honestly, I think we've all taken it for granted, and it's really showing us how these things we take for granted, when they're taken away, how it really affects our, emotional states, our mental states, our energetic states. Simply hugging a friend at Whole Foods, like just these little things, but they really add up, and they really, I think, both provide a discharge from stress and anxiety in our system, as well as a reassurance to our nervous system, and that sense of security and belonging and wholeness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really deeply in the last year, right before this whole pandemic, I've gotten more involved in communal touch than I ever had in my life. Like I had a practice where once a week I would go with a group of like maybe 15 friends, most of whom were body workers. We'd have like cuddle parties and like mutual massage. And I do feel almost like my nervous system got addicted to that release.
Totally.
And then having it completely gone was just very jarring.
Yeah, it's really abrupt and jarring. But Hannah, that's really, really wonderful. I think for everyone's body to experience what it's like to have safety with touch. When there's a space where the boundaries and parameters are set, and then your body can really relax to receiving touch. It's, I think the most nourishing thing. I think it harkens back to when we were in the womb and we're just like in this amniotic fluid and we're just being nourished.
I agree with you. And to a certain extent, I don't know if total safety was present. I don't actually, that's actually something I would love to talk to you about.
Yeah, sure.
It does seem like there's this ideal of a return to Eden or a return to the womb where like everything is flowing and easy. But like we do live in a world with a shadow side and danger. And so in the space I just mentioned, there were like explicit rules, it's non-sexual touch, it's a platonic space. But like in my sensory body, I can feel, when arousal emerges either for me or someone else.
Yes.
And the explicit instruction was we move away from that when that happens. But people got playful, people got edgy. It seemed also like the person who was hosting it was kind of using it as a way to pick up women. So it was there's a thing going on here.
I believe our intuition around picking up that kind of like secondary intentions, but especially for women, because women experience it all the time in our society, all the time. So, your spidey senses are probably spot on. And if you can imagine getting together with like your trusted friends or your trusted girlfriends or platonic boyfriends, friends who are guys, and just imagine the difference of safety that would feel, than this space. It's great to explore. And it sounds like it wasn't, it's different to have your spidey senses on alert than just receiving.
Yeah, and actually it's great that you mentioned that because we did have like a breakout group. We call this like mush space. We had like a breakout group that was more safe.
Good. Yeah, I'm really big on installing new somatic experiences in the body to replace old ones. And I find that it's quite magical how, it's like installing new software. It's like when a client has the experience of saying no and having my hands lift off their body and I step away from the table, for some, it's like the first time their body realizes that their no really matters, or what they want, what more importantly, what they don't want, really counts, and that new somatic imprint then gives them evidence that it does matter and changes their behaviors in the real world, where they can say, I had this one client, she was one of my youngest clients. She was 27 and, she was a people pleaser. So in intimate situations, she always just, wanted to please, just not really tuning into what her body wanted. And, you know, when I do this thing called yes, no, pause, slow. It's rewiring the body to say what it wants. And when she said no and had the experience of my hands lift from her back, one, she cried. It was so much emotion because it's what she always wanted to experience. But then with her new boyfriend, when things were not feeling right, it came out of her mouth, let's just pause, you know. And just those 3 words can be revolutionary because it allows for deeper intimacy, you know, because then people can really talk about what's working and what's not working. But most importantly, she's really advocating for her body. You know, when things are not feeling attuned, aligned, or like 100% yes in the body, there's something going on, and that can't, you know, the more that's overrun, the more numb the body gets, and the less it will be inclined to voice its needs.
I'd love to actually tell you about something that happened for me recently, because I think it's relevant to this discussion, and also made me long for more professionals having a really explicit method the way you do about yes, no, pause, slow. So I thought that since I'm doing this series, it would be really in integrity to get some somatic work myself. So I entered into somatic experiencing therapy about a month and a half ago with a highly recommended professional. And I like her. We had a good rapport. But there was a session about 2 weeks ago where touch came up that felt edgy for me and uncomfortable for me. And I have some of those people-pleasing tendencies you were mentioning. So my first thing was just to kind of do like a redirect. I was just like, can we work on like another area right now? And she was pretty insistent and actually got more firm with the way she was placing her hands on my body.
This is after your request?
After my gentle request, yeah.
Wow, okay.
And I escalated my ask 3 additional times to the point where I was literally saying to her, like, stop and no, like I used those words. And for whatever reason in this moment, she didn't acquiesce to my request. And I ended up having to literally get up off the table for the to stop. So for me, that experience was kind of a confirmation that I'm in a different place than I used to be, where I can like take care of myself when things get edgy. And, you know, we had one final session after that what ended up being a termination session. Because I do feel like bottom line, I need to know that my no is respected, especially in a therapeutic environment. And it didn't seem like there was a technique for getting back to safety.
Well, once that trust is breached, it's really hard, you know, because, you know, the body remembers everything, you know, the body keeps the score. So, but I mean, this situation that you're describing, it's a bit shocking to me that it took that many escalations and for you to finally take control of the session, really. And the fact that she's an SE practitioner is just shocking.
Yeah, I thought so too. And as I mentioned, I like her and I actually trust that she cares about me. So going through the beats of what had happened at the termination session was a really like fascinating experience because she was baffled by her own behavior too.
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, it's something I'm still trying to figure out whether I think maybe like I've become really practiced at masking or something. So people don't realize that like when I say no, I'm like serious about it. So I'm just kind of working through my end of things, but more importantly, like respecting my own sense that when something isn't right, it's okay to move on, which is a new thing for me. I usually
that's terrific. I mean, it sounds like your assertion, your level of assertion and your use of your voice and your actions, you demonstrated to yourself that you're at a whole other level, right? And those of us who were rewarded as, people pleasers when we were young, it's really, there are milestones to it. And it's a new threshold that it sounds like you demonstrated for yourself, which is fantastic. And it's great that she recognized that she was baffled by her own behavior, and it gave her material to really look into for herself too. So it wasn't just you. Clearly, she was baffled by her own behavior. Something was going on within her blind spots as well.
Yeah, and I really appreciated she was open to feedback. She asked if I knew of any specific trainings that I thought might be helpful to her. So I ended up sending her the link you posted yesterday. I don't know if that's the proper.
Oh, yeah, it is. That's actually perfect for her. I mean, the somatic consent work, I think all body workers or workers of touch should experience it, because if you imagine, Hannah, this is a great example. So, the cuddle party that you mentioned, where there were some secondary intentions, it's very subtle, but sometimes someone can be touching you. If for example, you're at a cuddle party and you're saying, oh, I'd like a hug, a guy or anyone could hug you in response to your request, but they can be in the taking mode rather than the giving mode. And it can get really shadowy with body workers. So in other words, if someone is very touch deprived and someone says, I need a hug, they'll be like, oh, I'll give you a hug, because they're wanting the touch. But then the hugger can feel like, oh, this is weird. I'm not feeling nourished by this hug. And it really comes into the intention of the one touching and the one being touched. So those intentions need to be really, really clear. Otherwise, it can get really murky. And I'm not saying, I don't know this SE practitioner well enough, but if she goes to somatic consent or one of those trainings, they really distinguish who the touch is for, if you're giving, if you're receiving, and where you can kind of, be in your blind spot and live out a shadowy, kind of a shadowy intention.
Yeah, I do want to take a little bit of ownership of my own shadow in this space too, because I've definitely recognized that there have been times in my life when I guess the way I think of it is giving to get. There are times in my life when I've gone out of my way to make food for someone or set up a special thing, but it's really because I feel lonesome or want reciprocity. And I do think that comes up with my touch too sometimes.
Yeah.
And I guess it's hard in a time like this when it feels like across the board, everyone needs a little more.
Yes.
How do we give in this really open-handed, generous way when it's hard for each person to feel nourished?
Yeah. So, in the trainings, what they would say is you have to make sure that your well is full so that you have been nourished and received enough. So you're giving from that place. Otherwise, and I think the state of our society right now, most people are malnourished and just touch deprived and yearning for just a hug. I mean, those of us who are single are like, where can I get a hug? And but I know people who are in couples, and they miss just touch from outside of their committed partners as well. So like Aileen says in her training, the same way that any tree leans and gravitates towards the sunlight, it's like their organic nature to receive nourishment from the sun. We human species, we gravitate towards connection, and so much of that connection is from touch. So we're all deprived right now. And the way to address that is to make sure that our, well is full before, we reach out. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of that can, I don't think we touch ourselves enough in our society. I mean, we're always looking for answers outside of ourselves. And, whether it's self-pleasuring or just taking a bath and just kind of, touching our own, I mean, I guess when it's done intentionally, I mean, all touch is great, whether you're in fantasy or in being present to your sensations. But I think when it's done intentionally, it can be way more nourishing than people realize.
That's beautiful.
One of my teachers, Ellen Heed, she just did a podcast, and she's really big on self-anal massage, and it's for a lot of anatomical and nerve-related reasons. Okay, so in a nutshell, the vagus nerve is the largest nerve in the body. It's all about down-regulating and relaxation, and the internal sphincter is one of the very few access points to the vagus nerve that you can actually literally touch into. But we hold so much tension in our pelvis and in our sphincters. And so a lot of the relaxation response in the body and release of stress can come from, just getting some castor oil and massaging the external sphincter, and more importantly, the internal sphincter. It can release all sorts of GI issues, downregulate the nervous system, and we hold a lot of emotions around safety and security there too. So anyways, she was just, as far as self-touch, there's many, many realms and kind of, kinds of self-touch you can engage in. But that's certainly one.
Great.
I mean, the way, yeah.
Do you recommend that people do any particular technique or listen to that podcast, or is it really just following what feels pleasurable?
Well, yeah, when it comes to self-anal massage, I think it really, really depends on people's relationship with their anuses, that part of their body. And when I say that, what I mean is a lot of people have a lot of taboo shame associations, certainly for hygiene related, or, for men, I think there's a lot of homophobia, and so, the only contact a lot of people have with it is when they wipe themselves, and so, I think a process would be to go gradually and to really listen to that part of the body and to try to dialogue with it if they're open to it, to listen for how that part of the body wants to be explored, wants to be touched, and definitely to use different oils. Coconut oil is a great oil, and and then it also depends on history of health. Some people have hemorrhoids, some people have surgeries or scar tissue, but to just become friendly with it, I mean, one, there's an enormous amount of pleasure that's available when people feel comfortable there. I mean, people have anal orgasms. Because the nerves associated there allow one to have an orgasm if one's interested in that. But I'm speaking. So in answer to your question, I would say move gradually. Really listen to that part of the body. Listen for what it's ready for. You never want to force anything into an orifice before it's ready. Never. So, if that part of the body is shy, then you want to really respect that, and just, maybe the first time you just want to have your fingers there present to feel that sensation and make friends with it, and then to gradually make some, soft circles around the external sphincter, but never just go into anything without, essentially receiving its permission.
Mm-hmm. And for people who are less familiar with the idea of being in dialogue with the body, can you just explain a little bit what it might mean to open up a conversation with the body?
Yeah. Aileen has a wonderful exercise in her training. I mean, it's a little bit, it's a little bit kind of like gestalting. So, so it's imagining, let's say, your mind dialoguing with a part of your body, So if it's my hand, it could be my hand, it could be my anal sphincter, it could be my toe. But this is particularly wonderful if a part of the body is feeling pain or discomfort, because often, I would say more times than not, there's some emotional aspect that is asking for a listening and a space to be held for that pain or discomfort. So it's really making friends with that part of the body by dialoguing with it. So it could be, you can sit or lie down and just have the mind, just, you can almost like watch your mind dialogue with that part of the body. And the mind can ask, would you be open for a dialogue? And just listen for that body to respond.
And do those responses come in the form of words or images or sensory feelings, or is it different for everyone?
That's a great question, and it's a great answer too. It's, I think, all of the above, and it's different for everyone. I mean, some people who are not so embodied will probably have more of a mental experience. Those who are very much in their bodies, it'll probably be more sensory. And it's like their minds can interpret the sense communication from that part of the body. And for some people, it is like images or an intuitive sense, not necessarily verbal language dialogue. But yeah, that that's I think a lot of somatic therapies, they may not be based on that specific dialoguing with the body, but a lot of them have that component, because, it is all about becoming whole and listening to, what our body wants to share with us.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rahi.
Yeah.